Lab number 85. Now we'll set up a local instance of Liberty Profile application server, and we will launch Application Center on it with the connection to remote database on a Bluemix. And in the third lab of this tutorial, we will actually push this local instance to Bluemix, and the AppCenter since that moment will be running fully on Bluemix. So let's start with opening the browser and searching for Liberty Profile. So you just need to go to lastDev, which is the part of Developer Works, and download the latest stable release. So it may take a while, it depends on the network speed. Let's wait until this one will finish. So download has finished and we can navigate to that folder. As you can see, after unpacking, the folder WLP contains the server itself. Of course, we can create the server instances that will be placed inside user servers folder, and this is exactly what we will do in a second. So we will need to open a terminal. Let me just arrange the windows a bit. And navigate inside downloads, then WLP, then bin folder, and we need to use the server create command and then type the name of our server instance. So let's call it AppCenter. So now we can see that AppCenter is created, and basically we see that we have already server XML, which is the main configuration file for our server there. What we need to do is to copy inside the apps folder our two WAR files. And basically those two WAR files can be found inside the Application Center folder. I would like to remind you that this one is located inside the path where you installed your MobileFirst Foundation server. So there is the Application Center folder, and inside there is the console folder, and we are interested in AppCenter console WAR file and of course Application Center WAR files. So just copy those two and place inside apps folder. So this is the first step. They are now there. So next step for us will be to open the server XML and modify it. So let's use any text editor for that. I will use Atom, but you can basically use whatever you want. And let me just close everything unnecessary. So what we have here by default is looking like a simple config, which has one feature that we actually don't need. We will remove that one. We will need to install other ones. It has basic registry that we also don't need. We will we will configure different ones. By default, server will be launched on port 9080, which is fine for us. Let's just add that the host can be any. This will be needed afterwards when we will try to push it on the Bluemix. We can save this. So server description, let's go with AppCenter here, for example. And next step for us will be to actually open documentation and follow the documentation to properly configure server XML. So for that, we need to search for Knowledge Center for MobileFirst platform. So we're interested in version 8. Make sure that you have documentation for version 8 opened, and then navigate to installing and configuring, and then installing and configuring Application Center. So we won't follow the installation paths using the IBM Installation Manager or AND tasks. So for us it will be manual installation. And the first step is configuring a DB2 database. So as you remember, we created the instance of a dashDB, which is of course different, but most of the things are actually the same. So we can skip the step for setting up the database manually. What we need to do is configuring Liberty Profile for DB2 manually. And there we need to pass that library and data source inside the server XML. So just put it somewhere under Application Manager, just like that. and we need to modify these things. So there are two things that needs to be modified. First is this library, which needs to load driver for connection to DB2, and then the properties for establishing the connection itself. So all of that can be found if you will go to Bluemix. So go to the console, log in using your credentials, navigate to all items, and then open this dashDB instance that we created previously. And what we need to do afterwards is to go to service credentials. So just click on view credentials and basically copy the values from here to your server XML. So we will start with database name. You need to copy your values. They may be different from what I have. I will continue with the username. Then the server name is this host. Port can be the same, so it is actually the same if we are using not a SSL connection. So password. And finally, there is this thing called current schema. And for that, basically, most probably it will be the same as the username, just with uppercase, but make sure you validated it before putting this schema name. And to validate it, go to manage, open the console for your service. And well, you can go, for example, to tables, and there will be a schema name right here. So you can just copy it and replace here. So one more thing that we need to do is to load those drivers. So for that, by default, you saw that we have this shared resources dir, which can be replaced to anything else. For example, to server config dir, which is the local path of these application centers, and then we can create a folder, for example, db2. And place our jar files in it just as we typed here. So what about those jar files? Basically, you can get them right from the console. So go to download tools through the connect and download the driver package. Ideally, you need to download the package for your operation system, but nobody stops you from downloading the package for other operation systems because basically they're equal. I mean, for our specific case, we are interested in Jdbc driver, and that is the same, totally the same. We are just interested in two jar files which are equal for all operation systems. So I will go, for example, with Linux package. And we also need to wait until that one will finish. It may take a while, so let's wait for it. Okay, I have it downloaded. Now basically I can unpack that archive and go inside the folder. And as I said, we are interested in Jdbc drivers, so you can grab that by again unpacking one more archive and navigating inside and just copying db2, JCC and JCC4 jar. So copy those two and place inside your WLP, user servers, AppCenter, and then the db2 folder that we just created for them. So now we're finished with db2 steps, so we can close this service and so we can continue with configuration of application center for Liberty itself. So what we need to do is we need to follow the path deploying the application center var files, because as you remember we copied those two var files and we are copied them to Liberty profile instance, and we will start with copying the features. So we will use first three. So the fourth called MFP decoder feature is basically a feature that will allow you to encode and decode the password. Here we will skip it for now. If you want to follow and install everything, you can just go down and copy the feature from extensions. It will work, there is no issues with that, it's just additional time. So next thing, we will need to copy the application definition itself and the registry. We don't need the Android SDK part because we won't be using it. So just copy everything starting from application and finishing with basic registry, and pass it after the data source configuration that we recently did. Just like that. So let's inspect what we just copied. Basically, we have AppCenter console and Application Center itself. So the first one is like a management console. The second one is the Application Center, where you can go and install the app right from the browser, for example. And those two have the usernames defined inside the user group. And the users, basically there are two users, AppCenter admin with the password admin, and user demo with the password demo. Of course, you can connect to the app server and mask the password. I mean, put here encrypted value and so on, but this is not a task for this quick win scenario, so we'll leave everything as is. And the var files are already in the proper location, so we don't need to modify that. What we actually need to modify is to add a key store. Otherwise, our applications won't work with the HTTPS connection. So we need to create a key store. It can be done by just typing key store and then providing some default values. Afterwards, the key store will be generated automatically. So some important values are ID. This is the predefined one. Then location. This can be actually anything. Then you also need to provide the password. This is, of course, something that you will define, so basically any password. And finally, there should be also type of your password. So for type, we will go with JKS. For password, let's go with something like demo center, but actually you can put here any of your values. For the ID, we need to use default key store. And the location, well, let's go with the same server config dir. So this is the local path, the AppCenter server, and then something like key store. So that file will be our key store actually. So basically, the key store will be generated after the first launch. We don't need to do anything else with it. And the last thing that we need to modify before we will be able to start a server is actually installing those features. So when we add in the features, it doesn't mean that they will be loaded. They will be loaded only if they are installed already for this server. So for that, we need to open the terminal, and then so we are now in bin folder. We need to use install utility, and using the install command, type the feature that we want to install, and we will start with Jdbc 4.0. Oh, I typed 3. Yeah, 4.0. It will search for it in the repository, and afterwards the feature will be found. You need to agree with the license agreement. So just press 1, as far as I remember, yes, let's select 1 for agree, and it will be installed. The next step for us will be to install the Servlet. .3.0. And the app security 2.0 is already there by default, so no installation needed. Okay, so we have those installed. So now basically we can start the server. Just type server start and then the AppCenter, which is the name of our server. The first start may take a while because we just installed the new features. You can monitor the startup, how it's happening using the console log, but normally everything should be fine and the server should be started within a couple of seconds, well, I guess up to 10 normally, and you will be able to go to the localhost 9080 to see that the server itself is running. There will be a landing page for Liberty. And then we need to navigate to application. Let's go with AppCenter console first, which is the application center console for administering or managing our application center. So as you remember, we defined AppCenter admin with the password admin as the username. So let's type it here. and we are inside. So basically on this step, if you didn't get any errors, it means the database connection was established and everything is fine. Otherwise, you will get the error like unable to connect to database or something like that. So we will go forward and install the sample application here. So if you have any IPA or APK file, you can use that. I will use the VLC client, which is just the media player one, popular ones, and we'll install this APK file to Application Center to see that it will able to load and so on. This APK file for me is quite large, so it's 16 megabytes, so it may take a while for me to load. So for you, if you just want to demo that apps are able to install, use something smaller, like a few megabytes up to 10 and so on. So after the application will be loaded to the database, we will be able to proceed. We will need to fill the description and a couple of other parameters, like whether the application is installer. Installer means that the app can be installed from our browser. So this is that second application. So if you will go to Application Center /installers.html, you will be able to launch the installers page. So this page, when it will be launched on the mobile device, will be able to show you, based on your operation system, the proper installers. So in this case, for me, I have no apps yet. Let's follow this path and see what will happen afterwards. So my application was uploaded and I can click next. I can type any description. As I said, I will mark this as installer and click done afterwards. And we should be able to see in a second that this app is now in our application center and we will be able to install it. Okay, so we have our application here. Of course, we can restrict the access based on the users and so on, but right away we see that apps now contain one VLC application, and inside the installers, actually, if even we will refresh this page, we should be able to see that yes, there is now an installer that we can click install, and basically if we would be on mobile device, it would be much better because we can start downloading and installing this app. While we in the browser, it will initialize the connection and will just allow us to download the APK file, so we are not interested in waiting for that. One more feature that we need to test is actually installing the application from public app store. So for example, if you want to install something like, well, let's go with Google Play Prisma application, which is quite popular nowadays. So you should be able to copy this URL and then just go to Application Center, pass the URL here, click Next, and this application should be able to load. So let's try to fill it like test app. And yep, you see that we have now application loaded for Android. Let's go with the same for iOS. So for example, Prisma, iTunes. So copy the URL, go back to Application Center, type Add Application, select the URL, place here the URL for iTunes, click Next. Let's go with smaller label, something like Prisma iOS. And yep, so we have now 3 applications, 2 for Android, 1 for iOS. Actually, that's all. That's really good, and we will finish our application center setup by pushing this application server instance on the Bluemix in our next lab.